All right, and we're rolling. So, thank you, Simon, for agreeing to be interviewed for the Cultural Master Plan today. Um, we have 11 questions that we would like to ask you. And the first question that I'd like to ask you is to tell us a bit about what you do for a living and for recreation, including what types of artistic and cultural activities you currently participate in.
Oh, well, first of all, for a living, I work within the arts in all areas of my employ, from film production as the producer director of animated and live action, and recently more reality type of variety type shows. I'm also a wood carver whenever I get commissions to do so, painter, sculptor, anything within the arts. I've never turned down a contract or a commission of any kind. If somebody asks me to do something and I've never done it before, I just go ahead and do it.
Is there any kind of art that you've found that you just aren't suited to?
Jewelry. Yeah, my hands are not as, despite the size, they're not as strong as they used to be. I think they're just worn out from the commercial fishing days.
Mm-hmm.
For enjoyment, everything is focused around my children. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. So to have fun for me these days is to entertain them the best I can.
Right. And I suspect the arts are involved in that a fair bit too.
The arts are involved a lot, as much as possible, but my son actually was not much interested in art when he was younger, because he had a difficult time with the communication between his brain and his hands, which we've seemed to overcome, and now he actually enjoys the arts. Mm-hmm. So in the studio, we have everything from drum kits to guitars, keyboards, drum making kits, and paper crafts and paints and everything. And they come down here quite often. Last year, I painted this floor, what I call a salmonberry orange, and now it's just saturated with black paint and glue and everything from myself and my children just having fun.
Great, fantastic. You mentioned commercial fishing. Did you do that at the same time you were an artist, or until you became rich and a rich and famous artist?
Well, nowhere near rich, sadly. I started commercial fishing when I was 2. I know that sounds strange, but every summer I would go on my grandfather's boat from the age of 2.
Wow.
And then when I was 11 years old, he said, "You are coming on my boat again this year, but you have to learn how to work. So no more goofing around, no more being a child. You have to work with the big boys," was his exact words. So I was up every morning at 5 a.m. with the rest of the crew and doing what I needed to do on deck. At the age of 11, for me, it was pulling purse line. Mm-hmm. And if anyone knows anything about seine fishing, that's a very long line. That's the entire length of the net. And it's my job to pull it on the winch and coil it up. Mm-hmm. And at 11 years old, that's a huge responsibility for an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
Probably where I developed most of my strength and my muscles was working on commercial fishing boats. And then when I was 12, my grandfather said, "I'm too old to teach you anything. You have to go work for your uncle." No, I had no choice. Mm-hmm. So I was employed by my uncle from the age of 12 until I was 26. There's not very many 26-year-olds can say that they had the same job for 15 years.
That's for sure. Wow.
And I remember when my uncle told me, "On your grandfather's boat, I remember you being a whiny, sniveling little brat. And as we say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil on your grandfather's boat."
Yeah.
He says, "On this boat, the squeaky wheel gets replaced, so keep your mouth shut." So I did. For 15 years, I kept my mouth shut. Until we were delivering the boat back to Vancouver when I was 26. I remember it was just after the commercial herring season. Mm-hmm. And I decided to get the courage to tell him that I was quitting and decided to go back to school. I started doing professional art when I was 15. I quit salmon fishing, I think, when I was 20 to focus my attention on my art career. But I still went commercial herring fishing to support my art career.
Wow.
But when the commercial herring fishing started to die out when I was 26, I decided that was the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe I got out a year too late. I should have made this jump a year ahead of that. But at the time, it was a good timing. I was mature enough to move out and do my own thing, and that's when I went to the Vancouver Film School.
Great. And when did you move to Bowen?
I've been working on and off Bowen since 1994. Mm-hmm. My father was one of the first artists to rent from Doug Barry up at Artisan Square back when the Bowen Island Brewery was there.
Ah.
So we had to deal with the smell of the hops dumped in the back all the time.
Uh-huh.
But we were the studio that was above the pet shop that just recently closed.
Right.
And I actually had that studio again last summer to do a commission. But we slept in there. We ate at I think it was called the Galley, or Gallery back then.
Right.
The restaurant. And we showered down at the marina. We had to pay for our showers and our laundry. So we were working in and out of that studio for a while.
Wow. That's a tattoo studio now, right?
The tattoo studio is underneath that one.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So upstairs, I think it's vacant right now.
Okay.
So we worked out of there for a while. And then in '96, I moved from Campbell River to North Vancouver when I went to Vancouver Film School. And I didn't carve for 2 years going to Vancouver Film School. And in 1998, I was in a car accident on the north side of the Lionsgate Bridge. I was rear-ended, and I was out of commission for 6 to 8 months. Mm-hmm. And I actually hired one of my cousins to do the hard work the laborer's work, the hollowing out, the chopping, the setting up of the blocks and stuff.
Right.
And ICBC almost didn't want to compensate me for my injuries because I produced more artwork in the 6 months than I had ever done in my life. Mm-hmm. But it was because it was 1998, 1999, which was the Mecca years for Aboriginal artworks.
Right.
I couldn't keep up. I'd phone galleries and tell them that I'm just about to start a project, and before I'd even tell them what it was, they would say sold. They didn't care what the price was.
Wow.
I couldn't keep up.
Great.
And I was producing anywhere from 2 to 3 pieces a month at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2000, probably a fantastic year for me. I had separated from everybody, including my father at that time, and focused on just being an independent artist out of my own studio. And in 2001, I was working in my studio when somebody knocked on my door and asked me if I would come and be interviewed. It was a company called Daiko from Fukushima, Japan. Well, actually, they're probably based out of Tokyo. The 5th largest advertising corporation in the world.
Right.
And they wanted to discuss the possibilities of me carving a totem pole for Japan. Mm-hmm. And they had received my name. They asked 3 galleries in Vancouver. I believe it was a Douglas Reynolds gallery, the Inuit gallery, and a Spirit Resto gallery, my 3 favorites. Mm-hmm. And my personal impression of those 2 galleries, they are the top galleries in Vancouver. Great. For Aboriginal artworks. Mm-hmm. They received lists from each of these galleries, and they had 10 names on each list, and mine was on all 3.
Fantastic.
Which was a shock to me because I'd never carved a totem pole in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So they heard that I had this reputation of being an internationally renowned totem carver, which I did not refute at all. I went along with it. And I was shortlisted down to 5.
Yeah.
And then I was shortlisted down to the top 3, and then I was finally accepted. And they told me the reason I was accepted. I was the only artist on the entire list of 27 or 37 artists, whatever it was, that said no problem to everything they offered. Where other people were arguing, I don't want to be in Japan for 3 months, or I want more money, or I don't want to bring someone with me. There was a lot of conditions.
Sure.
But absolutely everything they threw on the table, I just said no problem, no problem, no problem. Mm-hmm. And I found out quickly that Japanese people, even if they don't speak English, understand the words no problem very well.
Great.
So I went to Japan, carved in the summer of 2001, and I was over there for September 11th, 2001.
Wow.
Which was a world-changing event. Mm-hmm. especially with the arts. Um, there was a special event on September 9th, and I had commissions almost secured. No financial transactions yet, but almost secured, where people were going to come back, and talk to me about how to deliver and where I was going to carve.
Right.
For 6 total books.
Wow.
September 11th came along.
They
Nobody
all
came back.
disappeared, yeah.
Nobody came back.
Yeah.
So I took the money that I made in Japan, sent it back home, came back to Canada, and I'd phone the galleries and tell them I have a piece. And they said, no, we're not buying anymore.
Yep.
So my career at that point basically fell apart. And then Raven Tales came along. In 2003, we had a commitment from a studio. We had been trying to pitch this since 1998 when I met Chris Kentz. And finally, we had a studio that was willing to do the project if we were able to find financing. And Chris was able to find financing.
Right.
So we created Raven Tales, the pilot episode, with support of National Geographic. And it's been a history making since.
For sure. Absolutely. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next question is to tell us the story of one of your most memorable cultural or artistic experiences on Bowen Island, either as a performer, participant, amateur, or audience member.
Wow. Well,
I'm sure you can tell 1,000.
No, I'll make it quick because we moved here. We physically moved here. 2007, December 1st, the winter storm of 2007.
Wow.
There was numerous cars stuck on the hill after the ferry, which we had to go by because we had 4-wheel drive.
Mm-hmm.
But when we arrived here, I remember talking to someone from the Arts Council, and I can't remember who it was. But I said, honestly, you guys claim that you're an art community. I really don't see it. And I think we should work together to try to change that.
Mm-hmm.
So just after that, for 2010, came along this RFP to do a sculpture, public art sculpture.
Right.
I think I submitted 3 designs, and they chose the one where Shane Tweeten and I were going to work together as a collaborative project.
Mm-hmm.
And I still laugh today when some people say it was supposed to go in a roundabout, because my original design was an arch, which was supposed to go over the walkway for the library. So it was always intended to be in front of the library because that's where we were told it was going to be.
Right.
So when people say it was supposed to be in a roundabout, that was a complete fabrication. But because we only had 1 log and we had a limited amount of time and a limited amount of budget, we decided to combine the project, and that's when I designed this spiraling dragons.
Right.
I remember Shane coming to the studio with a lump of clay, and he started sculpting this thing, and that's where his background was from sculpting, and we just kind of worked together to simplify my drawings. Shane had this thing wrapping around 3 times or something. It was just really over the top.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked together to simplify the design where it's only a half turn. And the morning that the flame arrived on Bowen Island, we started carving at 6 a.m. in the freezing cold. It was minus 4 degrees that morning. Right. And here we are working on this project. And what I didn't tell anybody was, so focused on this project. But back home, my wife was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And we had kept it secret. We didn't want to tell anybody until we were confirmed that, that it was going to happen. And so my son was born that year, September 15th, he was born. And then we had Bowfest. My wife and I participated in Bowfest. And then we were actually the parade float for the Bowen Island Art Gallery. And we won the blue ribbon for best parade float that year for nonprofit or something.
Great.
And then we also participated in children's festivals for 2 years, the Bowen Island Children's Festival, which is not happening anymore. Mm-hmm. And somebody once asked me the question, how long have I lived on the island? And at that time I said I was on for 5 years. And they said, oh, so you're not an islander yet? And I said, listen, we've done every Bowfest, every children's festival. We've participated in art projects on this island.
Yeah.
things that people who've lived here their entire lives have never done. So we're an islander. So get off my back. Yeah,
that was 2010.
2010 was sculpture.
Okay, because you said you'd been on Bowen since '94.
94, I was working on the island in 94.
Okay.
I'm not living here permanently. I was just working here. My father was a resident, and I would just stay with him most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And before we moved here in 97 or 2007, I was working at someone's house. Melissa's actually putting together her front steps for her house. And my wife and I were living in North Vancouver at the time. And my wife called me crying one night because some teenagers were smashing the glass at Phibbs Exchange with their skateboards. And I went down to pick her up, and she jumped in the car and she says, "I don't want to live here anymore." And I happened to be working at Bowen at the time. So I just asked her if she would be interested in moving to Bowen, and she said, "Well, it depends on how long it takes me to get to work."
Mm-hmm.
So I asked her to get her things ready. We drove to Bowen, and the next ferry she caught back and went to work. And she said it was 10 minutes longer than her usual commute.
Right.
So we put a deposit on a place and moved over here.
Terrific. All right, great. What is the greatest challenge you face as a professional artist here on Bowen?
Yeah, finding work.
Still? Yeah.
Well, when I had Shaman Studios, I had people coming in the door and actually looking for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one person came in and saw the work on the wall and asked me who was the artist that does these works. And I said, well, numerous artists, most of them are related. And he said, you're native? I said, yes. And then he handed me the proposal for a building on Pender Street in downtown Vancouver. Asked me to submit a proposal. So I originally put together what I called the Indigenous Five. I was trying to go with the Group of Seven type of idea, where I would just combine 5 Aboriginal artists from the Inuit, Niska, Haida, Coastal Salish, Kwakwaka'wakw, and that was it. Just put together a small group of people.
Right.
And the first week, 3 of them quit. So I was down to, I had to find another one, and I was down to 3. And the other 2 produced their artworks. They sent them to me. I digitized them in Illustrator, submitted the designs, and we got the contract.
Great.
So I designed the stainless steel of the building, the one that's the infamous hotel right now, the Aboriginal Hotel down in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the design for the laser cut stainless steel. And then I did the designs for 3 floors for the lintels that were laser etched, and 3 designs for the concrete pillars on the outside of the building. And then the other 2 artists submitted a design each for each of the pillar and the lintel designs, and
Right.
we completed it and delivered it on time, and it was so nice to see that they used all the designs.
The challenges for finding work, is that visibility or is it that price sensitivity? Which do you think is?
Visibility. We've tried advertising, and now that I'm in association with Jay, he's trying to advertise for us through new media. He's also trying to work a commercial for Shaw TV for us for the Wildy Salmon show that I direct and he's the star of.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get people to come and see the studio. So we're actually having an open house in February again, and we'll try to show our artwork. And as my elder Lonnie Hindle would say, that only 1% of the population can afford your work, and only 1% of them actually like your work. So you need to find those people.
Right.
Living on Bowen Island, it's difficult to find those people because those people are buying out of the galleries in Vancouver, and if those galleries aren't buying from me anymore, it's very difficult to expose my work to those select people.
Right.
The galleries, however, are telling me that the internet is finally working. Back in 2000, probably until 2 years ago, the internet was not working for arts. People preferred to still go to galleries, still wanted to go to art shows. But finally now the art is now being exposed on the internet, probably due to streaming videos. Now you can see three-dimensional pieces being rotated.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons why the internet's finally working for the arts.
Does that sell completed works or commissions?
Sadly, completed works. People
Right.
want to see it before they buy it. And as an artist who relies upon commissions, then I don't have the clientele willing to put a deposit on a piece, so I have to come out of pocket to start a piece, to finish a piece. And if I'm already broke to begin with, then it's difficult to work with. Now, when I've produced some of my best works, it was because I was actually getting funded by Raventails at the time.
Right.
So as a producer and as a director and as the creator of the artwork, I was getting a salary back then, so I was actually able to do the art at night and then focus on my art career as a carver and a painter during the day,
Mm-hmm.
and then go back to the computer at night and draw as character sketches and stuff.
Great. Okay, the next question is, what's holding you back from participating in or attending more creative and artistic activities, if that's even possible in your case?
Well, right now I'm Mr. Mom, so I'm most of my focus is being taxi dad,
Right.
driving my children to and from school, taekwondo classes and ballet classes. Once a week we have to go. We try to buy some of our food here in Bowen, but it's so expensive, so we do try to make an occasional trip to Vancouver. Mm-hmm. So I have to take a day, usually on a weekend, where I take my children with me to do the grocery run. My wife is now working 5 days a week, so she's gone from being mom 100% of the time to now being a working mom most of the time. So someone has to step up and take on the parenting role.
Sure.
But when they're in school, when they are at taekwondo or they're at ballet, I try to focus on my career as an artist, trying to network first and foremost, because if I don't get the commissions, then I'm not paying our bills. And,
yeah, sure.
But I am trying to take a few risks here. I do have a piece that's roughed out, ready to go. Mm-hmm. I have these two pieces, which sadly are donation pieces, but they're going to shows that may benefit us in the future. So I will focus on getting these completed and delivered so that I can attend these shows in hopes that I get a commission. And that's just the way of an artist in the 21st century.
Yep, for sure. When you think of arts and culture on Bowen, is there a particular person or place that comes first to mind?
Well, the Bowen Island Art Gallery is the central hub of arts on the island. Mm-hmm. Now that I'm on the Arts Council, I can see it from the inside and see how the wheels turn for an art-based council. As far as a person is concerned, I would have to say Dawn Smoke is one of the most exposed artists on the island. Mm-hmm. That's why I didn't hesitate to ask her to be involved in Authentic Aboriginal on Bowen. Right. When we would line up for the ferry in the summertime and it was raining and the tents were set up in the Lower Cove, she was the only person sitting down there under the tent on rainy days.
Wow. On
Monday mornings, on Tuesday mornings, on Sunday mornings. And she's just a trooper. Every single day she's out there.
Fantastic.
Even the bakeries weren't there as many times as Dawn Smoke was. And when I saw her arts and she shared with me her prices, I was just in shock about how low her prices were for the quality of artwork that she produces.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I raised her prices, which shocked her so much for the art show. Now, it sadly didn't benefit her in sales because only her smaller pieces sold.
Yeah.
But even her smaller pieces, I raised her prices on. So she did actually do well in the show.
It is interesting, the price point on Bowen. I don't know whether it's the fact that we've kind of got two cultures on Bowen, one of which has money but is not very present on Bowen because they're busy commuting back and forth. And the other, or the people who are involved in all the community activities,
Yes.
they don't have much money to spare.
Yes, so I call them the ones who don't really do anything on here. I call them the sleepers. And where I came up with that term was I was in Seamus Studios one day, and this woman came in, and she was looking around the gallery, and she just said to me that she didn't know that this place existed.
Right.
And I said, "Oh, we've only been open for a few months. This is probably the spring of 2011." And she says, "No, I'm talking about Artisan Square. I didn't know this place existed."
Oh, good grief.
And I said, "Well, you must be new to the island." She says, "I've lived here for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I realized at that point that she's just like a large part of the population that wake up in the morning, commute to Vancouver, do all of their shopping and work in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
They eat in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And they catch the last ferry, go home, go to sleep.
Yeah.
And on weekends, they're so tired, they just sleep all weekend. And they do same thing again next week.
Yeah.
They're the sleepers. They don't
so
get
you got
involved.
a name for the rest of us?
We're the workers.
The workers.
We're just the ones who, most of us are piss poor broke. It's hand to mouth, and we're trying to find any work that we can. This last summer, I was working as a contractor, renovating houses.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tried to get another job to paint a house, and they told me that my price was too high. And I was like, well, no, actually, for what I do, I'm one of the cheapest guys running.
Yeah.
But they never called me back, so they probably found a student to do it for less than I was.
Yeah.
But there's so much competition for that right now. Every single person on the island is doing contract work because it's the sleepers need us to go fix their houses for them.
Yeah.
But finding those jobs are so difficult when you have 20 other people competing.
Yeah. The other interviews I've done so far, I keep hearing two words, and they're kind of implied by what you're saying. The first is sanctuary, that people come here for sanctuary, kind of as you did after the problem that your wife faced.
Yes, well, my wife and I talked about it. What we realized is that there are people who are either running to the island or running away from something else.
Yeah.
We ran to the island because we wanted to have children, and we were having a difficult time conceiving, so the doctor said you needed to reduce your stress.
Right.
So we moved to Bowen Island for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then when my son was conceived, we actually went through one of the most stressful things that anyone can really go through.
Wow.
Actually, the day after she took the medication that they recommended, was when we were hit with one of the most vile, disgusting things that we could ever be involved in. And we've been trying to rebuild ever since.
Wow. Yeah, the second word that we hear after sanctuary is struggle.
Yes.
And to some extent, they go hand to hand, but
yes.
It's interesting. I mean, I think it's something that unites. I'm getting the sense that it's something that unites all Bowen Islanders, both the sleepers and the workers.
Yes.
Their struggles are different, but they both came here for sanctuary, and they're both in their own way struggling.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting that's... All right, compared to Vancouver, what differentiates Bowen Island most from Vancouver?
Peace.
Culturally. Peace?
Oh, culturally.
Well, peace is... That's part of culture.
Well, again, we moved here for quiet, and we received that. In fact, the first 3 nights that we were here, we couldn't sleep. It was just too quiet. At the time, we were living on the corner of Miller and Melmore, and my wife was working downtown Vancouver still, so she was commuting, but it was an easy commute for her because they have the trails there. So for her to walk down to the ferry took her 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the bus was another 35 minutes once she got to Horseshoe Bay. There was the occasion where she'd miss the bus and then she'd be late or something, but most of the time it was okay. But to find that peace for us, to have children and to raise them was key to being on the island.
Right.
Culturally, I would actually have to say peace again because of my working with children, whether I'm working in the schools or working for the schools. That peace actually gives me the tranquility to come up with these ideas. So culturally, I was creating craft projects for the Burnaby School District. And one day, I had a commission to do 450 Dreamcatcher kits.
Okay.
So every time the wind would pick up, I knew it was the perfect time. The next day, I would head out to Killarney Lake and pick up all of the cedar branches that had dropped off the trees.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't actually destroying trees to do this because this was natural. It was a natural thing happening. But I had to find the ones that weren't down for 2 weeks because those ones are too brittle. I had to find the ones that were fresh. So I go into the forest with a big plastic bag, and I'd collect anywhere from 50 to 100 a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd come home and I'd spend usually 2 or 3 days turning those into hoops and then binding them.
Right.
And then having a chosen length of artificial sinew that we would put into the package, and beads and feathers and stuff. And then we'd bundle up these packages, and my wife would come home at night, and then she'd take those packages and put them in boxes, and we'd pay like 50 per box.
Wow.
And my son was already born, so we were putting him in diaper boxes, which have handles, and they're perfect.
Sure.
Which we also delivered the bentwood boxes in. Well, not bentwood, but they were cut wood boxes. 450 of them again.
Mm-hmm.
But that piece on the island,
assembly line.
It was an assembly line, and when you're the contracted, the designer, the producer, and everything in these assembly lines, having that piece really does help. If I was in Vancouver, I would have had to find a studio space to do it, and at that time we were doing everything out of the laundry room at the house we were in, which is the reason why when we had an opportunity to move, I jumped on this place because it had the studio space.
Sure.
So here we are, this big, huge, beautiful studio space, all the room we need, and the contract for the Burnaby School District is now done. They don't want any more craft projects.
Wow.
I'm hoping that'll change again.
Yeah.
But I do have the ability, the knowledge, and the materials to deliver any craft projects to any school at any time.
You sound like me when I was a consultant for many years. You always say yes. Whenever anybody says, I've got a possible project for you, but I'm not sure if you're the one to do it. The answer is yes, we can do that.
I'm absolutely the person to do it. When my business partner, Chris Kentz, bought a house here on the island, he had somebody give him a quote, which he didn't like, and asked me to do it for a third of what they quoted. And I said yes, jumped on it right away.
Wow.
I should have asked for more money, but I did it. I put an IKEA kitchen together. I disassembled and reassembled 3 bathrooms and gutted all the floors. All the carpets were ripped out, refinished a hardwood floor, repainted all those walls, and even repainted the ceiling, which he didn't think was necessary. And then when he finally saw it, he said, wow, you were right. This really needed it.
Yeah. In terms of our culture, since 1994, your first time on Bowen, what do you think has changed the most?
Well, the first thing that I remember was this beautiful mural that was on the wall down by the ferry. And then you come off the ferry and you almost wanted to stop and get out of your car and go look at this mural.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was removed. And for obvious reasons, it was starting to fall apart. And then Josh was commissioned to do this project, which nobody knew about. It just suddenly showed up one day. And I remember everyone was confused. What is this thing? And yeah, I'm really proud of Josh for doing it and doing something a little odd. It is very odd as far as an art piece is concerned. It makes sense to him. It makes sense to some other people, but I'm still confused by the whole thing myself.
Is this the piece that's down by the ferry terminal now?
Yes.
The long
mural. Yes.
It's interesting. I noticed it for the first time. I actually stopped and looked at it really for the first time yesterday when I was in the ferry lineup.
It's been up for 5 years now.
I know.
It's
I know. And you know, you're in a hurry. You go past it, and it's kind of innocuous.
Yes.
But when you look at it, it's the way in which I guess it's like paint on wood.
It's paint on wood. and it's been coated with numerous coatings to protect it. And then I actually put some flashing over top because the water was actually saturating the top of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I was made aware of this was because originally they had laminated cedar that were cut specifically for that piece.
Right.
That didn't work. It just did not work.
Mm-hmm.
The laminate boards were actually starting to separate because of the water. So they tested some of the stuff in the conditions, and it was not made for an exterior installation.
Yeah.
So they had to use an exterior grade plywood instead, which actually worked much better for Josh because there's no seams.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the boards butted up to each other, but
yeah.
there's no seams that would actually grab the paint. And that's the difficult part about wood, is if the wood grain is not the same and you try to paint it, some pieces of wood will accept it where others will reject it.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't going to work for his project at all unless he coated it with something first.
Right.
And the reason why I knew that was because those pieces of cedar were offered to Shane and I to do something with. And it was Sarah Haxby that actually brought it to our attention. And she said, well, why don't you guys do a project for the school? Mm-hmm. So Shane and I actually worked on a mural project that's can be seen in the primary wing, where we actually had every child from kindergarten to grade 6 actually carve with us.
Great.
Something that I had done in the Burnaby School District, where I've actually developed a style and technique where every child, including kindergarten and preschool students, can actually carve with sharp tools. Never had an incident with a child yet. Teachers and principals are not my responsibility. And I realize children listen, but quite often parents and teachers just don't listen to you when you're trying to instruct them. I know better. And I've had to carry bandages for the teachers and principals of school.
I know you're involved in a lot of different artistic and cultural activities. Is there some kind of art that you're not involved with and think you might someday be interested in getting involved?
Well, our last meeting for BIAC, we were talking about public arts, and I'm just so in love with public arts. It not only employs me, but it also gives exposure to what I love so much, and that's the creation of art. When we created the sculpture, I'll never forget the first day when we had this log that was donated by somebody here on the island, and I think that was the pure beauty of that project. Mm-hmm. The location where we carved it was donated. The log was donated. The paint was donated. Every piece was donated by somebody from the island. So this was a united piece. Mm-hmm. And when we created the sculpture, Shane, on the first day, grabbed his chainsaw, and he'd never done anything like this. And it reminded me of the first day I carved a totem pole. And I did the same thing he did, where I was so nervous that I was just barely touching the chain to the log. Yeah. And I literally shoved him, and the chain went right into the log. And I said, Shane, quit, you need to do this. And so we were able to work together to create this sculpture because of all the kind gestures of Bowen Island. And every day we'd arrive, and despite the cold, we had the big doors open. On rainy days, we closed them because of the splashes, but we had the doors open, and we had people from Bowen Island come in almost daily. And quite often, we had the same people come almost daily. There was a man who walked his dog who lived in the Miller-Melmore area who would come over and just sit on the log and watch us create. And the sculpture came together in a very short time. Wow. And we actually, I think we erected it in late May or June, because I remember it was a very hot day. Mm-hmm. I think I got sunburned that day. Right. So we were able to put this together very, very quickly to commemorate the flame coming to the island. Yeah. But it was because of a united front on behalf of so many people who lived here on Bowen. Mm-hmm. And I forgot the question.
That's okay, you answered it.
Okay.
It's something that you'd like to learn more about.
Yes.
So in relation to public art, is there a skill that you don't have in the arts that you might need to learn if we did public art in some kind of a significant way?
I've dabbled in everything. Working on the boats, I've welded. It was one of the things I focused on in high school was metal shop because I was so proficient at wood shop. I was actually a teacher's assistant wood shop and automotive because I was fairly good at those. But metal, I was always afraid of the heat,
Right.
I guess. So I've done a little bit of everything, including glass blowing, but I'm not very good at glass blowing. So if I was to do a public art piece and needed glass, I would probably work collaboratively with another artist to do that part.
Yeah.
But I could design it because I know how glass works now.
Right.
But as far as anything else is concerned, I've done airbrushing. I've done, wow, different kinds of paints. Now, mind you, I still consult with the experts when it comes to paints because I'm not as knowledgeable about different types of paints for exterior installations and such. For example, an exterior installation made of aluminum, do you use an enamel base? Or, of course I would consult with the experts on that.
Mm-hmm.
But doing the laser cut for the building on Pender, I actually went to Britco, I think, or Brentco, whatever it's called, the studio where they actually laser cut and watched them cut it out.
Right.
I was in awe, and I needed to know more. And he described to me about the techniques that are used, so that knowledge was pouring into my head. And then they showed me the water cut machine, and they were cutting 4-inch thick steel at the time.
Wow.
And I was just amazed that water can cut steel. I was just so impressed. So I just learn as much as possible whenever I can. Drum making. Never made a drum in my life. I was asked to make a drum for somebody, so I went to First Supply in Vancouver, and they had the hoops, they had the skins, they had the sinew, everything I needed. I watched a video on YouTube on how to make drums, and I made my first drum back in 2010. And I've been making drums ever since.
Fantastic.
And I get better as I progress.
Yeah.
So, no, I accept every single commission that comes across my path. And if I don't know how to do it, I just learn how to do it. Recently, I learned how to, and I'm very in awe of, and want to try, drywall sculpting.
Drywall sculpting.
Where you actually take a piece of drywall or a wall, and you apply the mud to the wall, in what you see in your head, and then you go back and sculpt it with a putty knife into any shape you want. And the one that I was watching was the scene of a fish jumping out of a lake with the trees in the background, and everything was sculpted out of drywall. And I think that would be so much, that would be wonderful in Northwest Coast Designs.
Yeah.
Because instead of carving out, I'm sculpting it. So it's a complete opposite. But I think it would actually be really, really interesting to do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Last question then is, any other thoughts? You know what the cultural master plan is all about. Any other thoughts about needs, strengths, or ideas of things that we should consider in doing the plan report?
I think the most important thing that I've really realized here on Bowen Island is just to get something done. Quite often we have to have public consultation, and I really don't like public consultation on Bowen Island because 50% of the people out there are going to love the idea, they want you to go for it, and the other 50% are just going to outright tear it down.
Right.
And that's why nothing ever gets done on this island. There's no municipal office that they want. There's no, I have 2 children. I'd love to have a public swimming pool, which I was told they tried to do 10 years ago. They had this design, they had the funding, they had everything ready to do this public outdoor swimming pool. And then this person jumped in, and they needed fencing, they needed a lifeguard station, they needed change room, they needed a circulation system, everything. And it turned into a $2 million project. And somebody said, well, we're not going to fund a $2 million project.
Right.
And somebody also said to me, well, why don't you just go swim on the beach? Well, you take a 2-year-old down to the beach. They last for 10 seconds in the cold ocean. No, we need a public swimming space. So public consultation, I wouldn't say throw it out, but definitely take the criticism with a little grain of sugar. Yeah. Because there's so much salt thrown on this island, and it gets ridiculous now. And I'm actually really proud of what the pub owner's doing. He submitted this design, and he said, this is what we're going to do. okay, yeah, you can put your 2 words in, but I'm still going to build it no matter what you say.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
what we should do.
Yeah.
Is say, listen, we're going to build this public building. We're going to have, most important, we're going to have a medical clinic
Mm-hmm.
where it can be open, even if it's only open 5 days a week. But it'd be better to have an emergency situation station there.
Sure.
7 days a week, where our children, when they get these 42-degree temperatures, have a place to go instead of us having to dial 911 to get them on the ferry.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, again, public consultation. Well, no, I don't want a building where you're going to have your municipal office and a
Right.
medical center. We want to turn it into a cultural center too. Well, let's focus on what's necessary.
Yeah.
Yes, it's nice to have a place for song and dance, but we need a place to have our children be healed first and foremost.
Sure.
We need a place where our I don't mind where the municipal office is now. They seem to be not getting the work done, but at least having a place where they can talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I visited a town in New Zealand that decided they needed a performing arts space, and they couldn't get the money for it and the support for it. So one day, one of the citizens bought one of these inflatable golf course things. You know, these big dome things that they just blow up with in air.
Yes. And
he put it out on a farmer's field, and he said, we have a performing arts space, and they've been using it ever since.
Yes, and that's really how a small community should work.
Yeah.
You know, the whole. I remember when they put up this notice that they were going to do the artificial turf at school.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Now, if anyone has ever walked on that field in the middle of a rain, knows why you need an artificial turf field on Bowen Island.
Yeah.
We're on a rock.
Yeah.
And you pour water on a rock.
Yep.
It's going to create a puddle.
For
That's
sure.
what the field was, a giant puddle.
Yeah.
So they built this. And people were shunning it, saying, no, we don't like it, get rid of it. Yet, if you drive by there on a Saturday night, you see the lights. It's another issue. But you see the lights, and you see children out there playing.
Place is used constantly. Absolutely.
And then they were going to put the lights up.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, people are complaining it's going to interfere, the light pollution.
Light pollution,
No.
yeah.
No, you can go drink your wine somewhere else and
Exactly.
let the children play. And then it's okay, the soccer group says, well, we want a regulation-sized field now. So we're going to cut down a couple of trees and we're going to expand the field. People lost their friggin' minds.
I know.
I remember one guy said, how dare you cut down these 1,000-year-old cedar trees? And I didn't mind chiming in at this point. I said, listen, buddy, I said, that tree's 60 years old. It is rotten to the core.
Yeah.
Go look at the tree. Actually get off of your wheelchair. Go look at the damn tree. You'll see a hole this big that birds are flying in and out of because they're eating the inside of this tree because all the bugs are eating it.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I've been saying. Like, get off your damn wheelchair. Just go have a look.
Go do something.
The sleepers.
The Nike. The Nike slogan. Just do it. Thank you for your time today.
You're welcome.
Great.